So, hello everybody. My name is Sammy. I am the events and education coordinator at Goosefoot. So, I run all of our events. I teach a lot of our workshops. I do our social media. Graphic design is a big part of what I do. A lot of you guys are in a lot of different fields, small businesses, nonprofits, all sorts of places. When you're trying to get the message out, you have to have a really good punchy graphic to go with it or to encapsulate the message because we as a society are very visual people. We like to, see things and it gets it through our brain so much faster than reading it. And in this day and age, when we are all absurdly busy, that's sometimes the best we can do. So, today we're going to be talking about graphic design. This is a very complex subject, as I'm sure everybody who's even tried their hand at it knows. There are people who spend, years of their life studying just graphic design. It takes lots of experience. It takes lots of paying attention to what other people are doing to see, what works for you, what you're capable of doing, and settling on the right image to express the right message. So, today, we're mostly just going to be talking about some basics of design theory, some things that you should really focus on, make sure you do or don't do for the best start to your graphics. I'll be going over a few resources that are good for everybody to use. Some are paid, some are free. And like I said, there's so much great resources in the chat as well. Some of you guys have been doing this for years. Some of you guys are just starting out and you don't know where to go from here. So at any time, please feel free to chime in on the chat. These are always workshops, not lectures. So it's not just me talking at you for 2 hours. I highly encourage you guys to use the chat, use the Q&A function, ask questions. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm really glad I have Marion here because the chat is going faster than I've ever seen it. So I'm likely to miss things, but you guys feel free to answer each other as well. Lots of different perspectives are great. And I can answer Q&As. So we'll go ahead and get started. Feel free to ask those at any time. You don't have to hold them to the end.
Hey, Sammy, we have just a really fascinating group of people from
We
all
really do.
different areas.
A lot of them sent me their info ahead of time, which I really appreciate.
Yeah,
But it's
really
such a
great.
good group.
It is. You guys should all get together sometime and invite us.
Yeah.
I will keep an eye on questions.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure thing.
So on that note, let's go ahead and get started. First off, the general tips, the do's and don'ts of graphic design. The trick is when you're an experienced enough graphic designer, you can break more or less all of these. But when you're just getting started, it's really important to stick to the rules because that'll help you gain that experience, that confidence. And once you have enough experience, you can start figuring out when you're allowed to break the rules in ways that work for you. But it's a lot easier on the brain. It's a lot easier on the whole process if you stick to some pretty basic rules to start. So the first tip overall that I wish everyone who made graphics would pay attention to is stay focused. The more that's going on in your image, the more text there is, the more pictures, the busier it is, the more distracting it is. It's especially for graphics on social media, which is the focus of this mostly. You have such a limited amount of time to catch people's attention. And if there is so much going on in the frame, in the picture, people are just going to keep scrolling past it because it's overwhelming. So it's really important to stay focused. Less is more. My background isn't super clear. It's a little busy, but it would be worse if I hadn't cleaned it earlier today. The background is there, but it's still me in focus. So especially with social media, the less you do, the more impactful what you have done is going to be. With social media, you shouldn't be trying to cram 5 different things into a single image, into a single post. You should be making 5 separate posts on a single idea. So, whether it's events, whether it's a call to action, whether it's products you have, the more focused down you can get, the better. The biggest rule is if you can cut it, do cut it. I'm going to be straight up front with you guys. My biggest weakness in writing, in designing, in everything, I am a very verbose person. I like words. I like to talk about things. I like to explain things in depth so that we're all on the same page and we all know what we're talking about. This is great for, my crow brain that wants to grab all the shiny things, but it's not super great when I'm trying to communicate a message in a very short amount of time because it's overwhelming and you start to just drop things off when you can't hold all of it. Imagine, you've got your cup and it's only this big and I'm pouring more and more into it. It's going to overflow pretty quickly. And then all of that effort on my part is wasted. So my strategy, because I know this is a tendency of mine, is when I'm starting out, I go ahead and put everything on the page. I write down an entire page of notes. I slap in a folder with all of the possible images I could be using. And then once I have it all out, I look at it and go, is this really important? Is this vital information? For example, I just designed a few ads a couple days ago. There's a lot of information that ad is covering, but really the only important information is what is this about? Where can they go get more information? And what do I want them to do with this? And so I can put all that really in-depth, deep explanation on the website where there's space for it and where somebody has to intentionally go to it and read through it. So they're in a mindset that they want to see that. But then I can keep the ad focused on what I want to accomplish. And so I can get people to do the thing I want them to do in that graphic. Fonts. Fonts are probably my biggest nitpick, especially with less experienced artists. People just like to do all sorts of fun fonts, and I totally get it. There are a billion fonts out there. I can spend, literally not kidding, an entire day just trying out different fonts to try to get the right atmosphere that I want. But you shouldn't be doing more than 1 or 2 fonts in a piece. Sometimes you want that contrast of maybe, something, a nice big bold sans serif as the header and then a nice serif font as the body. You can have, those contrasts. But when you start to put in too many fonts, it looks amateurish and the eye doesn't really know where to go. And again, it's not focused. So pick 1 or maybe 2 fonts that are your go-to and stick with those for the entire piece. And even better if you can have a consistent presence across all of your pieces, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. The biggest rule, obviously, overall, is design with your customer in mind. Who is it that is going to be looking at this thing and where are they going to be looking at it? So obviously, if you have an older population, as you get older, your eyes start to go and it's harder to read things. In my free time, I cross stitch. I like to stitch these really intricate pieces that I have on the wall over here. It is very tiny. And I have a lot of older friends who ask me, how can you do that without a magnifying glass? My eyes cannot see that. But it's fine for me because I have younger eyes. I can't see distance, but that's a different story. So for a younger audience, you can have, you don't have to worry quite as much about the font size. You can have more faster moving places. The younger and younger generations, even people younger than me, have been brought up their entire life with speed reading as like a necessary skill they're being taught. So they can read things faster. They can process images faster. So if you have a younger audience, you can go with the speed with smaller. Whereas if you have an older audience, you need to stay focused. You need to use bigger fonts so that they don't have a hard time reading it. You need to make sure you're presenting one solid idea and not kind of jumping all over the place because they're going to get frustrated and they're going to disengage with what you're trying to show them. So, and also, teenagers versus their parents alike can appreciate different things and they look at things in different ways. Sometimes men and women look at things in different ways. If you're a lingerie shop, your messaging is going to be different when you're talking to the women who would be using that lingerie versus the men who might be buying their partners that lingerie. So knowing who you're trying to talk to and where they are going to see it is drastically going to shape the direction of the piece. So that is something you need to decide before you ever start to actually design it. Next tip is something I wish a lot more people would do. Don't be afraid to put people in your pictures. A lot of businesses and organizations pick images for their ads, for their sites, for their social media that are devoid of people because they're really worried about permissions. They're really worried about liability. But pictures with people in them are a lot more engaging to the brain. There's just a psychological factor. We want to be in a place where people are. I've got an ad on my desk. I'm trying to look. So this is a guide that came out from Island Tourism recently. It's got a nice, lovely person on this beach in this car instead of just the beach. I want to be there. I want to be that person. I can project myself onto this woman. Even things that aren't just people centric, we've got a nice ad from one of our farms here, and it's them out. These are real people that I can buy my food from locally. They're real human beings that I can support. But even ones that aren't centered on people, here's some food ones. Your eyes kind of go to the ones with people in them, people who are holding the dishes, people are about ready to dig in, rather than the ones that are nice, cold, austere. It's a picture of a thing and it's appealing. Yeah, sorry, Kristen. I'll send you guys a link to this so you can check it out after the email. But when you put people in your pictures, people can project themselves into that scenario a lot easier. It's a lot more welcoming and friendly. And in this day and age, with cameras everywhere, with everybody on social media, you don't have to worry so much about liability. Largely, if somebody is in a public place, the courts have decided that's just by being in that public space, being at that public event, they're consenting to being in pictures. But if you're really worried about it, you can stage photo shoots. So get your friends and family, get community members that you can get to volunteer, be like, hey, I'll feed you guys, I'll give you some coffee, whatever. If you would come into my space and act like you're having a good time for this photo shoot. Or, if you're having a public event for your nonprofit, put up signs in the door that say, hey, we will be taking pictures. If you enter past this space, you are consenting to be in pictures. The only time I would really, really genuinely concernedly worry about this is with children, because there are different requirements for photos with children. Emily was the merchandise coordinator. That's wonderful. So you have to be more careful with children. There are a lot of legal liabilities that can be in there. Yes, thank you. There's the link for exactly what I was showing you guys. So with kids, that is a time I would definitely sit the parents down and ask for their permission. If you can get them to sign a photography release waiver, that's great. If you're running a program with kids in it, you can just include that in the paperwork. I used to work for an organization that did National Lemonade Day locally. And part of the paperwork that the parents had to sign their kids up for the program was a photography release, so that as I was taking pictures of the kids at these events, we had permission to use them. So there's a lot of ways you can get around it pretty easily, but put people in your pictures. Even if you have to get, a nephew or a kid or a neighbor to be your model, just holding something or using their hands, but put human beings back in your images that you use to breathe life into them. Okay, moving on from pictures. White space is your friend. A lot of amateur designers have a struggle where they cram every bit of information they can into every available space. They're afraid of the blank spaces on a piece. But white space gives your eye a place to rest. It guides the reader down in the way you want it to. It makes things feel more relaxed and pleasant. If you walk onto a busy town square and there's just packed people to people, I don't want to go in there. That's really overwhelming. But if it's, a nice, gentle side street and there's maybe a couple of people around, but I can wander down at my own pace and check out the shops, that's a lot more appealing to me. And it's the same thing with an image. If there's so much happening in every little corner, that's so overwhelming, and I'm just going to keep scrolling on my social media feed to the next thing. But if there's, white space, like on this slide up in the corner around my face, that gives my eye a place to rest so that I'm not just constantly processing things all the time. It gives me a place to relax and go at my own pace. Now, the term white space does not actually mean white. I have a lot of white on this slide. White space just means there's not anything happening there. So if you're taking a picture on the beach and you're taking a picture of this nice rock outcropping, and then you just have water going out from there, that water is the white space because there's nothing detailed happening there, but it's still part of the background. So don't be afraid of white space. Don't cram every single graphic you make with information in every little cubic space. Give it a little bit of a rest. Overall, with designs, humans love straight lines and right angles. So a lot of folks are very tempted to tilt things, to put things in, weird configurations. And that has its purpose. We'll talk about that in a little while, but there are times that's beneficial. It gives you some energy. It can make things seem, chaotic or lively or fun. But overall, if you show somebody, what's the thing? I have two pictures right here. So you show somebody a nice, even picture lined up with the edges of the frame, or you show them, a nice angled one. They're going to gravitate towards the nice straight lines. That's just part of human psychology. We love order, despite the fact that nature does not have any order whatsoever. So if you're organizing things on a graphic, make sure you're lining them up evenly with each other. Make sure all of the text lines up in a same line. You don't have things randomly indented or over too far. Everything is lined up on one side of the page, just like this. It would be a different story if I had different text boxes that started in the middle of the page or up in the right corner. So keep in mind of the composition, the nice orderly layout of your piece. I talked about the purpose a little bit, figure out who the target customer is, who's going to be looking at it. What do you want them to do with the information? If you're just putting out a pretty picture, great, but that's a limited utility for pretty much all nonprofits and businesses. So what is the thing you're hoping to accomplish with this? And where is it going? If you're making a graphic for Facebook, it is going to be different than one you make for Instagram or for Twitter or for a newspaper ad. So you need to know where it's going so you can know the dimensions of it. The most important thing that, who's going to be looking at it and how they're going to interact with it, and what you want them to do with it. And on that note, the call to action, it seems really dumb. If you're showing off, your nice, pretty goods, you might think to yourself, well, it's obvious I want them to come buy my stuff. But if you don't tell them that, it's far more likely in all of our busy schedules that we're going to scroll past, go, oh, pretty, and then keep scrolling. But if you tell people, hey, go check out the shop, sign up for my newsletter, sign up for this class, give us a call, then they're more likely to go, oh, yeah, I should do that. Even if they just open up in another tab or they make a note of it for later. Don't forget to tell people what it is you want them to do and make it as easy as possible for them to do it. The more barriers you put in place of people, the more likely they're going to just stop doing it. If you want somebody to donate to your organization, that post should have a link directly to where they can donate. If it gets to, oh, we link to our homepage, and then you have to click here to learn about our programs, and then you can click on the donate page, people are going to just stop what they were doing because we're all busy and we have other things to do. So make it as easy as possible and tell them clearly what it is you want them to do. So if there's any questions on the general tips, feel free to let me know. We'll keep on moving. I wanted to show you guys this. This shows a few different examples. Here's two ads for the same company. Your eye probably immediately went to the right because that one is cleaner. It's more direct to the point. It's more focused. It doesn't have the call to action. Like this one does, it has the visit us at remypencils.com, But for people who are internet savvy enough, they'll just Google Remy pencils and they'll go find the site on their own. But the first ad, it's got something happening in every corner of the ad. It's got about 4 different fonts in it. It's very crowded. It's very busy. That new quality is really poor, which is not great for online things. So I just want to give you guys this quick example of showing you how much more impactful the less is more approach is and staying focused. You don't have to extol the virtues of your pencils over and over and over. You don't have to tell people what a pencil is for. They know just right. So it's better to stay focused than to cram everything you think people need to know, because the cleaner ad already has everything I need to know, the brand name. And in this connected day of the internet, I can just go to their website on my own. I can find that. Even better, because of how the internet works, these graphics don't just appear on their own, they appear in a social media post. And so the text on the post is giving me a lot of the information that's on this image. It's giving me their website, it's giving me their hours, anything that they need me to know. It's up in the text. But the function of the graphic is to catch my attention and make me stop and then process the text. So that's the function. Overall, with graphic design, one of the most important things you can do for your brand and your business in general is have consistent branding. Every piece you put out should look like it came from the same place. Whether people go to your website, whether they get their newsletter in their inbox, they follow you on social media, they see a print flyer from you, they see an ad in the newspaper, it should all look like it came from the same organization. And the way you do that is by having consistent coloring schemes, similar images, the feels of images. Are you up close and personal? Are you a little bit distant? Are you professional? Are you fun? What you should have consistent images. And then also, of course, the easiest thing is your logo. Your logo should be on pretty much everything you print out. Even this nice clean ad, it has the logo in the corner. Let people know that it's from your organization. Stick to the same color scheme, stick to the same fonts. We'll be talking in a little bit about a style guide, but don't reinvent yourself for every single piece you put out, because if you have ever in your life drastically changed your haircut or your makeup style, you should know whenever you do that, there are a large swath of people who don't recognize you anymore. Even people who have known you for years, at first glance, they'll just be like, oh, it's a new person. And then it'll take them a bit to realize it's you. It's the same thing with graphics for your business. If you are reinventing yourself in every single graphic you put out, you're basically putting out a new message from a new company every single time. That stops you from building that familiarity of people knowing, oh, this is Would Be Playhouse, or oh, this is Macaroni Kid, or the Oak Harbor Music Festival. You need to be consistent so that people know it's you at a glance. They already know and trust you and like you. So you've skipped that step of having to do it every single time. And people know this piece is you. Now I can actually pay attention to it. So how do you do that? Creating a style guide is a really great internal piece for you yourself, but also if you ever hire anybody to do work for you, or you get interns or family members who help you out. A style guide can be as really complex or as simple as you want it to be. The style guide I use for Goosefoot is pretty much half a page of a PDF. I've written style guides that are 3 to 10 pages long, and I've seen style guides from newspapers, universities, places like that are 50 or 100 or more pages long. But a style guide is just your guide to saying, this is the elements I use to accurately convey who I am as a business, a brand, an organization, whatever it is. So it should include your logo and any variations of it. So you can see in the top corner, we've got the Goosefoot logo on all of these slides. It's our nice long one. but we also have a version that's more square and it's just the rings of the G, and I can use that for social media icons. Some organizations have a long version, a tall version, and a square version. Any of those that you have, put this on one page so people know the proper configuration of your logo, what they should be valuing color wise, how to grayscale it. Our logo is very easy to grayscale. We just turn everything black or white, depending on what the situation calls for. But some folks have more complicated logos that have multiple colors in it. And so you have to go to certain shades of gray in order to accurately reflect what the image is. So you should tell people what that is. If you have limitations on your logo, on how small it can go for somebody to be able to read it, or how big it can go before your particular copy of your logo gets really grainy and pixelated, if there are any of those limitations, put that in your style guide so you have an easy reference point of going, okay, here's how the logo can be used and here's different forms of it. Your color palette is really important. Again, color is one of the easiest ways to distinguish who your brand is. And you can have multiple colors. As you see on this slide, for a long time, Goosefoot's colors were pretty much this barn red color. And I have, a nice gradient of it going on these slides. Now that we have a website, we do have a few more colors. So I'm actually going to go ahead, Marion, I'm assuming you're fine with it. I'm going to show you guys the thing I use for our style guide. Sorry, I gotta step out of the way. And there we go. So this is the style guide I use for Goosefoot. It doesn't have, it's our style guide for our website, but I use it for our, my sweater does match the logo somewhat. There are some other colors farther down. I use it for the website, but I also use it for ads I put out. So on the top are the colors I can use and their specific hexadecimal codes, which is really great for when I'm using other programs. I've got the fonts. So the header should be in Techo. Most of the other text should be in Open Sans, drop quotes or italics. So this is really helpful for me. Like I said, this is more for our website, but I still pull it up every time I'm designing an ad. So I make sure the colors are consistent across everything we use. So it can be as simple as this, or it can be really complicated, whatever works best for your needs. It is not a graded piece of paper. I'm never going to come in and check on you and be like, where's your style guide? I'm just saying, create this guide, whatever it looks like for you. So you have an easy reference you can pull up really quickly and make sure you are being consistent whenever you're creating a graphic for your organization. Typography, again, I showed you that a little bit. You can say, we tend to have headers in this font and body text in this font. That having that typography laid out has been hugely helpful for me because, again, when left to my own devices with fonts, I can spend an entire day on it. I love looking at different fonts, and I'm very picky about what kind of fonts convey what kind of moods. But if I have a typography style guide of like, hey, these are the fonts we use, great. I don't have to think about that. I can just stick to the pattern and I can get done and focused on what I'm actually creating faster. Imagery, if you have certain go-to images for your organization, you can include these in this section. But also, as I was saying earlier, you can just describe what sort of images you use. Do you want to use pictures of small, laughing small children as much as possible? Do you want to stick to pictures of dogs? Do you want to stick to pictures that a certain photographer has shot or that are internal to your organization? Are stock photos okay? And if so, what kind of mood should they convey? What color palette should they focus on? This, as you are starting out new, this section is usually pretty small because you're not sure. But as you continue, as you grow as a designer, as you use more images for whatever you're doing, you're going to start to figure out your style. You're going to figure out, hey, these kind of things work for me. They convey what I'm trying to do, and these ones do not. So we should stay away from pictures like that. Marion can chime in on this, but Marion does not like stock photos. There is a certain feel to stock photos that you know when you look at it, it's a stock photo, even if you don't know where it came from. That doesn't come when you took when an photographer took pictures of actual people in an actual setting. And so for Goosefoot, we are going to value a picture of actual people over really high quality professional stock footage any day, because that feel of realness, of community, of human beings is part of our brand as Goosefoot. So that's the kind of imagery that would be in a style guide for our organization. And then lastly, you should talk a little bit about your voice. What is how do you express yourself? You as a brand, whether that is an individual, an organization, a business, everybody, they have their own voice. Goosefoot, we are fairly relaxed. We are very personable. We're very friendly, but there's still a level of professionalism. I'm not going to jokingly call other people or organizations names because that doesn't fit into our voice. I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be enthusiastic about our community, especially, but I'm not going to be too analytic because that's not who we are. I'm not going to be overly familiar because, again, that's not who we are as a brand. But there's groups in here. I know a lot of you guys. I've seen you in other stuff. Some of you are more scientific and analytical. Some of you guys are quite silly and fun and irreverent. Some of you guys might be a little raunchy sometimes. It's different for all of you, and you all know who you are deep down. So you just need to spend a little bit of time thinking about, what is your voice? What is the way you should speak that conveys that to people? And then, of course, another last thing on style guides that's, less fun, but still important for consistency is how you use certain formatting and phrases. You know, when you're putting time, when you're writing time on something, do you use, 5:00, or do you use 5? Do you use a hyphen? Do you use an M dash? Do you use upper or lowercase PMs and AMs? Do you put a period between them? Do you have an extra space after sentences? I don't know why people do this. I think it's a holdover from older devices. But what is it? What are the little tiny technical things that make it consistent so that that's not something you have to fight with when multiple people are doing a thing? So that's a style guide. If you guys need examples of this, I'm happy to pull up some. Just go ahead and shoot me an email. So design principles. These sound really boring, but they're some of the funnest things about graphic design. I really enjoy them. So colors convey emotion. It conveys emotion, personality, and it sets the mood for the piece. So I've got this graph here, color theory. Reds are daring, spirited, exciting, independent, young. Greens are peaceful, reliable, secure, confident, technical. So there are so many color theory resources out there on the internet. Yeah, exactly. It was something that was taught in private class. But there's so many resources out there on color theory. It is an extensively studied psychological phenomenon that certain colors invoke certain emotions in human beings. It can be applied to a lot of things, such as what colors you paint your house, but it can also be applied for when you're making graphics, when you're thinking about that background color or your logo color or the overall color of an image. Think about what that mood that you want to pull in, and maybe focus on cut pictures in that kind of vein. Balance is incredibly important. This slide is actually very poorly balanced, I will admit it, but the focus actually isn't on the slide. It's what I'm saying verbally. So balance, every piece in an image has weight. This is a little aggressively weighted all the way over to the left because that's where all the text sits. But the sizes of things, where they're in relation to each other, your piece works better when it is better balanced. You know, this slide is more visually appealing because it is evenly balanced. Both of the pieces are the same size, they're on the same level, than this slide where everything is tilted to the left. Sometimes it's just what happens, but when you are intentionally designing a graphic, make sure you're focused on the balance. And you don't always have to be symmetrical. There is a distinct appeal and intentional asymmetry as well for human beings. So whether you do symmetrical or asymmetrical, it doesn't necessarily matter. It just matters that you meant to do it and it didn't just accidentally happen. Lines. Lines help guide the eye. They keep elements framed together and grouped. Straight lines create harmony and balance. Curvy lines create movement. So those are other things to keep in mind. You know, depending on what you're trying to do in the piece, if you have to put a line in it, think about what you're trying to accomplish and which line is going to help with that. And it doesn't have to be a physical line either. This slide does have lines at the top and bottom of slides. It keeps the content nicely boxed in. But there's also an invisible line that runs right here between the bullet points and the words. So there's lines all over pieces. You can create lines out of white space. And same thing with a curve. If you have text curved in certain ways, that creates that movement and that flow. Typography. We talked about this before, but I'm going to once again emphasize, stick to 1 or 2 pieces, max 3 different kinds of typography, but you don't want to have a ton of different thoughts going on in one piece. It's very distracting and very amateurish. Also, when you're working on your typography, you're also going to want to pay attention to a little thing called kerning. So kerning is the space of letters around each other. So it can be both the space in between letters. Sometimes kerning can get off and words can kind of squish together in weird ways, but it also can be the top and bottom as well. So if I were to type, if I were to type on this slide, let's add a new text box just so I don't mess everything up. Now, because these lines that I added, the hello, kerning is K-E-R, I'll just spell it out, K-E-R-N-I-N-G, kerning. So because these words are the same font, the same size, they're pretty evenly spaced. But if I were to make this one a lot bigger, suddenly, as you see, the bigger it gets, there is now more space between this line and this one. A lot of times that's great. I want that. But sometimes, you know, if I also make this one that same spot, now they're a little bit farther apart than I want it to be. There are a lot of software out there that'll let you fuss with the kerning enough that you can get them closer together. So this is the extent that Illustrator or PowerPoint lets you do it is the kerning between letters, so I can space stuff out more. But there's also kerning between lines as well. So don't be afraid to move stuff closer together too. Okay, so that's the fun thing about typography. Contrast. Contrast makes the world go round. Figuring out good contrast is the difference between an amateur designer and a skilled designer. It is something that takes a lot of practice, a lot of observing other people's pieces, and constant work to get good at. Contrast can be between shapes, it can be between colors, and it can be between sizes. You can contrast a lot of different pieces in one image. The contrast helps bring dynamism to the piece. It helps make it feel alive and interesting, rather than this nice kind of flat slide I've got here in front of me. Scale is very important. Scale can bring attention to certain elements, and it can demonstrate a concept. So making something bigger is more in relation to something else, tells a story more succinctly, but more impactful than paragraphs of text could possibly do. So pay attention to the scale of things if you need it, if you're comparing items. But overall, regardless, I think I talk about this later down as well in the hierarchy section, but the biggest thing is the most important. That is regardless, whatever piece you're making for whatever format, for whatever person, the bigger something is, the more important it is. So keep that in mind when you're actually making your piece. Proximity is really important. The closer things are grouped together, the more they are immediately related in our brains. The more spread out things are in our brains, that contrasts them. So if you are talking about a subject, make sure you're grouping all relevant pieces of that subject together. For example, if we were talking about this workshop, I would be grouping the date, the time, and where to find, where to sign up for it all together in one place. I wouldn't put the date up here and then a description and then the time down somewhere else, because then they start to get lost and they start to not have anything to do with each other. So, that grouping, that proximity helps people's brains make the patterns that our brains all want to make all the time anyway. Hierarchy. Again, I talked about this a little bit, but the most important thing should be the biggest. It also helps if it's at the top, depending on how long your image is. The most important thing at the top and everything flowing down from there. But with fun graphic design, you can have a nice variety. And so there are plenty of pieces that the big, most important thing is right smack in the middle of the screen, and then other smaller pieces flow out from there. But overall, with the hierarchy, make sure you're focused on the goal, not necessarily the call to action, but the goal. What is this piece supposed to accomplish? Whether it is an action, whether it is an emotion, a connection, what is the most important thing this piece could be doing? The biggest thing on that piece should be causing that to happen. Repetition can be incredibly important. With the design of your piece, your repetition should be, again, in your colors you use, your fonts, the language you use, the kind of pictures you use, because that tells the person who is looking at it, even if this is the first time they've ever seen this particular piece, that it is from your organization and it's not something completely new and different. But also, you should be using the same element for multiple pieces. When I talk about the street dances, we, last 2019, when we did the last set of street dances, we made a really cool rainbow wireframe of the cash store as the central image. That was the central image on the poster. That was a corner piece on all of our banners. That was the only picture for the social media posts. That was the biggest central piece with all the dates and times below for ads. We printed it on a t-shirt. We used that same image every single time we talked about the street dances, so that everyone would know these are the Bayview Corner street dances and not the Langley ones or the Oak Harbor ones. Keep repeating that same element. Whenever you are designing something, I will warn you, you are going to get bored of the graphic long before anybody else ever will, because you have been looking at it since the conception of the piece. You've looked at it through every alteration. You've looked at it every single time you had to approve an ad or make a new social media post or put it up on your website. You've seen it constantly. You are going to think it's boring. Other people are not. So stick with the same thing, even if it seems boring to you, because it's not boring to everybody else and it's actually impactful for them. Direction is incredibly important in a piece. And again, something I see a lot of amateur designers trip themselves up on. Your piece should naturally guide people through how they should be looking at it. But overall, for ease, so that you're not constantly fighting against the flow, largely English always reads from the top left to the bottom right. So we go top left across to the right, and then kind of in a Z formation back down to the next line and then over again. So good, strong designs start with that. They have either something in the top left or like the middle, but you still read left to right, and then you flow down from there. If your big important thing is in the middle and then you have text above and below, I'm not always sure what order I should be reading that. My brain is going to start on the big thing, but then it doesn't know where to jump to from there. And again, that leads to frustration. It leads to feeling like I don't know what this wants of me. So I'm just going to disengage and move on with my life because I have a huge stack of other things I should be doing. So make sure you're paying attention to the flow of your piece and you're guiding people deliberately through what you want them to look at in the order you want them to look at it. If you print it out or set it in a different format or show it to somebody else and their eyes kind of sporadically jumping all over the page, you should go back and redesign it because it wasn't effective. Space is important in a number of factors. That goes back to that white space. White space is your friend. Give your piece room to breathe. It's way better to have one impactful statement in one corner of your piece and the rest is a blank, nice, pretty image that doesn't say words. That is going to be way more impactful than having a square full of words all the time. So space is simple. It lets brains relax. It helps guides the eye. And you can also use the space to amplify other elements. For example, the FedEx logo is one of my favorite examples. A lot of people haven't noticed, and I'm actually going to go ahead and pull it up so you can see. Which one is which? There we go. The FedEx logo has phenomenal use of white space. So in their logo, we'll go ahead and view this. Yeah, okay, great. FedEx, wonderful. But there is an arrow, if you haven't noticed, between the E and the X on FedEx. There is an arrow pointing to the right. That indicates motion and momentum and traveling. So that is a nice, clever use of white space. This is, again, that Kearney, you can see all the letters touch each other. That is a clever, subtle use of white space that can have a pretty big impact. So pay attention to your white space. Think about what it's doing for you. And is there something it could be doing even better? So, talked about color theory already. Going back to what I was talking about earlier of knowing where it's going. This class is overall a graphic design for social media course. So I wanted to talk about the sizes of social media. I'm not going to read all these off to you. You guys can see the slide, but also at the end of this workshop, I will be sending you the slides so that you have them as reference and you can pull them up. But I'll warn you right now, social media, just how the platforms work, they change constantly. The standards change, the layouts change. So these are the sizes as of right now, as of last night when I was finishing up this workshop. But if you're making an image for a specific site, for a specific function, you should Google that platform and current sizes. These are all in pixels because that is the most standard way to display things on the internet. It's not inches or anything like that because different people have different monitors and different quality of graphics. Excuse me. So Facebook is still largely valuing wider than it is tall. It is the layout that most of us are used to because that is how monitors are laid out. So your images should be longer than they are tall. If they are taller than they are long, Facebook is a little bit more adaptive than most of these platforms, but it will inevitably crop some of the height in order to get to the width that it wants. So you can have images that go beyond these bounds, but when you're looking at it on the platform without actually clicking on the image itself, it is going to hide some of the top and bottom or the sides, depending on what you're doing, in order to make it fit in the space that they want. So just be aware of that. So, however, they have a new thing with it, I knew within the last couple of years, called stories that they've taken from Instagram. Stories reside at the top of your feed. They're, prime real estate to get attention, and it's content that disappears in 24 hours. And the thing with stories is you have to deliberately click on it. It's not going to be mixed in with your normal content. And when you click on it, it expands to take up your entire screen. So, because stories were built with mobile in mind, phones and tablets, it is taller than it is wide. So, again, as you can see immediately, if I were designing a graphic for a post versus a graphic for a story, I would approach it from very different angles. Twitter is one of the more fascinating. Again, they prefer tall, longer than it is tall. However, Twitter has a very interesting built-in cropping feature. If it is not perfectly to size, Twitter will crop it, and they don't let you decide how that cropped image looks. Once you've clicked on it, you can see the whole image, but they will decide what the most interesting part of the picture is, and it'll only show that in the frame, and it'll crop everything else out until somebody clicks on it to see the full image. This has led to lots of shenanigans on Twitter, but there are different sizes if you have a single image, if you have 2 images, if you have 3 images, and if you have 4 images. So Twitter's fun. Instagram is the original, and they still to this day prefer square images. So it's the same width as it is tall. Again, you can have taller images or wider images, and Twitter or Instagram now has the option for you to go ahead and upload it wider than it is tall. But when you're actually looking at your feed, not your feed, sorry, if you go to somebody who goes to your profile where it's got the grid of images, it will still crop it back down to a square. So, on that note, it really is a lot easier for you if you make the Instagram post a square to begin with. Again, that does not hold true for stories. Stories take up the entire screen, so they are taller than they are wide. Pinterest is really unique on their images in that they limit the width of an image, but not the height. You can have an image as long as you want. In fact, a lot of images on Instagram are like you have to actually scroll down them because they're so long, and it just crops it to the width of your screen. So Pinterest limits it to 600 pixels wide, but you can do whatever you want lengthwise. They recommend 2 to 3 aspect ratio or a 1 to 3.5. So you see I've got in there, I think I took it out everywhere else. Aspect ratios are another way a lot of sites will tell you how they want it to be. So Instagram, because it is a square, their aspect ratio is 1 to 1. The width is the same as the height. Facebook is a little more like 3 to 2. So, if you multiply or if you multiplied your width by 3, you should multiply whatever the height is by 2 to or divide. Math's not my strong suit, but your image should be 3 times as wide to 2 times as high, basically. So that gives you a little bit more fluidity. But a lot of you folks, I noticed when I had you send me your info about your experience in advance, you were using things like Microsoft Publisher. Publisher, I think nowadays it will give you pixel options when you're setting up a document, but most Microsoft products stick to inches. Your page is 8.5 by 11 or whatever. But pretty much every other design piece you're going to use, be it any of the Adobe suite or Canva or anything like that, they're usually going to stick to pixels. So make sure you're designing your things with pixels in mind. If you ask me how many inches it is, I'm going to ask you, well, that depends on your DPI and a lot of complicated questions. So stick with the pixels when you're designing your elements, but keep in mind where you're going to be putting this graphic so that you know how to design it. Now, obviously, if you make an image for Facebook, you could just as easily upload it to all of these other platforms as well. You're not going to have it's not going to mess with it too badly, but it's going to be a stronger overall presence if you can make graphics for specific platforms. So while you're making the Facebook post, you might as well make one for Instagram as well, carrying the same elements over and just changing the aspect and the layout a little bit. So before I get into the design tools, I've been talking for about an hour. So I really want to give you guys a 5-minute break. So we'll come back at 2:02 or 2:03 now. I want you guys, to go get some more water, go to the bathroom, maybe stand up and stretch. And also, if you feel free, put in questions in the chat, but we'll be back in about 5 minutes. So, all right, back to it. So there are a lot of tools out there to help you with design. As I mentioned, a lot of you mentioned in your emails that you're using Microsoft Publisher, which is great. I know it's been a wonderful tool in the past. My caution, I'm sure you're already aware of this, is Microsoft is phasing Publisher out. The last version of Publisher they made was 2019. It doesn't come in the Microsoft 365 suite. You have to buy it separately, and they're updating it for now, but it's very likely that Publisher is going to be gone by 2025, 2026. As in, like, if you have it, you can still use it, but it won't get any security updates or bug fixes or anything like that. So if you're using Publisher and you plan to continue making graphics for the next 10 or so years, I would caution you might want to give yourself some time to migrate to something else in the meantime. And luckily, there are a lot of really cool tools out there. So obviously, I put Microsoft Word templates in here. Microsoft isn't totally free. You have to pay for it, but a lot of folks have it for other purposes. So Microsoft does have some really cool templates built into the system. So that's a good place to start with some good designs, especially if you're doing more posters, flyers, brochures, that kind of thing. But they have some really cool templates built into the system. GIMP is a open source program. It's a lot like Adobe Photoshop. It is like Adobe. It's like Adobe Photoshop 2004. It's a little it's a little outdated. The interface is a little clunky, but it's totally free, and open source means it's open to everybody, and anybody can kind of mess with the code to make new things out of it. And so GIMP is a really cool option if you want the flexibility and the power of Photoshop, but you don't want to give Adobe lots and lots of money because the Adobe suite is kind of expensive. It does have a pretty steep learning curve out of all of these free options. It just can take a lot of time to learn, but because it's open source and because it's been around for so long, there are so many resources out there to help teach you how to use it. The last is another popular one I see come up in emails, and I think probably at the beginning of this class, is Canva. I personally am a really big fan of Canva. I don't use it a lot because I do have the Adobe Creative Suite, but Canva is a really cool system that is free to use. They do have paid options to give you more accessibility, but you can go in and do a lot in the free one as well. And I'm actually going to go ahead and pull it up. I had it open earlier. No, my controls got in the way. I think it's this one. No. Oh, there it is. Oh, no. Controls are getting in the way. So this is what Canva looks like when you have it. A lot of folks, like I said, are using it. It's really great for beginners because it uses kind of a drag and drop idea. And they have a ton of themes and formats and ideas already built into the system. So as you can see, just looking at this right now, they have Instagram posts right here, animated social media post, video, Facebook posts. They do have logos. And I should have mentioned this earlier in the graphic design class. Logo is the one thing I really would not recommend an amateur do. Because the logo is the face of your business and you're going to be using it for such a long time and for so many things. If you're going to invest in a professional doing anything for you, I would recommend hiring someone to make you a good logo. But there are tools in here if you wanted to try it yourself. But there's a lot of really great, like I said, it's drag and drop. So you can pick the templates, coronavirus, newsrooms, sales, food, birthday, and you can search things as well. So I don't know, clothing. Look, here's some really cool layouts, and you can just kind of pick the one you like. If you click on it, it goes ahead and pops it in here. And now I can change the font to whatever my preferred font is. I can swap out the image. I can change the colors. I can drag things around if I want. So there's a lot of really cool things that are built in here that make it very easy for for a newcomer to get into and make really quality stuff. So I would recommend Canva if you don't have any practice in this, you don't even know how to get started, you just feel overwhelmed by everything. I would genuinely recommend Canva. It is really cool tool and you can do a lot with a free account. So this is not sponsored. Canva does not pay me anything. They're welcome to if they want to, but I'm genuinely a fan of it and what it enables people to do. Because prior to tools like that existing, you pretty much had to either spend lots of time and money on the more advanced software, or you pretty much had to pay somebody to do it for you. But a lot of tools like Canva and others, there are so many out there on the internet that I don't have on here just because I don't personally have experience with them, but they do exist. And if you find something you like, by all means, go with it. But these are just the ones I personally recommend. If you are open to paying for it, you can get some additional resources as well. So again, Canva has a pro version. Lucid Press is another design site that is built so that people can create graphics. It's kind of between. It's not quite as easy to use as Canva, but it's a lot more easy to use than a lot of the software. And it has just different kinds of layouts. So if you just don't like the feel of Canva as much, Lucid Press might be an option. And I do believe they have a free trial. So you can try it before you buy it. Adobe Creative Suite is what I use. So it's the thing I have the most experience with. I do use Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign and what's the publisher? They're not publisher. Premiere Pro for videos. I use all of those. I'm going to tell you right now, if you're a beginner, they are overwhelming. You can do a lot with them. They can be very scary and very hard to use. Oh, Canva offers the the pro version for free to nonprofits. That's awesome. And yes, TechSoup does offer nonprofit discounts as well. So there's a lot of ways to get discounts on this, but I really like the Adobe software. Well, I caveat that I appreciate what the Adobe software allows me to do. Adobe is a company I don't always agree with, and it is absolutely not beginner friendly. It can be very overwhelming. There's so many buttons and options. If I just open Illustrator, for those of you who haven't used Adobe programs and you're not familiar with it, all I'm doing is opening Illustrator right now. It's such a big program; it takes a bit to open. We'll create a new document. Yeah, sure, that's fine. And here's all of my controls. It can definitely be overwhelming. There's so much stuff you can do with it, but it can get really intimidating. So if you've ever tried to use them and you backed out, don't feel bad about yourself. It's very overwhelming. However, there are a lot of really cool tools for all of the stuff I'm talking about. Hopefully, those of you in chat, do you have a library card? If you have a Snow Isle library card, I'm going to close you. So we have one of the coolest library systems in the entire state. I'm very firm on this. They offer us so much stuff for absurdly good rates. So if you go to online resources, um, and they've moved stuff around since they've recently um, redesigned the sites. It's going to take me a second to get there. But I'm going to go to online resources, and then I'm going to go to the resource list right here because that's the fastest way for me to find it. There's one in their A to Z resources list that's called lynda.com. Obviously, it'd be down in the L's. Lynda.com is a video tutorial database. Oh, it's not here. They must have moved it. Online resources. There we go. I'll send you guys a link to where to find it as well. Yeah, they seem to have moved it again, unfortunately. I'll send you guys the link exactly where on the library you find it. But if you go straight to lynda.com, you do have to pay them money. But if you go through the library, you get access for free, which is phenomenal. And they have at the top of that page. Oh, lynda.com. Oh, it's LinkedIn Learnings now. They've changed the name. Good to know. So that's why I couldn't find it on the A to Z list. So if I go back to that A to Z list, resources list, and I'm just going to click L because that'll be faster. LinkedIn Learning. Yep, there we go. So it's formerly lynda.com. So the LinkedIn Learning, oh, am I going to have to set up an account? Yeah, I'm not going to do it. But their database is massive, and they have videos on Canva. They have videos on all the Adobe software, pretty much anything. They also have basic design, graphic design videos as well. So I used it to teach myself how to use the Adobe Premiere Pro when I was editing videos. I've used it to teach myself how to make GIFs, so moving images. I've used it to teach me how to use certain things. So I really recommend going to LinkedIn Learning now. No, it's not lynda.com. And they can teach you how to use all of things, but also how to do even more specific things than what I'm talking about in this class. Also, I saw a lot of you, a couple of you, when you sent me in your emails about who you are and what your graphic design experience is. Some of you mentioned that you just sort of Google to see how to do things. And one person was kind of self-deprecating about that. They're like, I'm not very good. I have to Google things. That does not mean you're not good, because all of us do that. I was making a graphic for a client last night, and I was Googling, how do I gold foil letters? So I Google things constantly. So there's a lot of really cool resources out there. YouTube is a phenomenal one. I tend to check lynda.com first because those are made by certified professionals. So I know they're going to be good ones. And then, of course, there's always professional graphic designers. If you need something really good, really punchy, it's your annual fundraiser, or it's a really big sale or something that's very important to you, and you really want it to have a good impact. There are a lot of graphic designers on this island that they are available to hire for projects as well. So that's an option if you go through all of this and you're just like, I don't want to do it. Pay someone else to do it for you. There's even, and now I'm going to talk about resources rather than just the software. One of these I'm familiar with. One of these I just learned about, and I'm really excited about it. The first one that I'm excited about is, so Adobe has a site called color.adobe.com. They can give you color palettes to work with. It's so cool. So the Recolor site, they have some really cool color palettes to work from here. But you can also search stuff up here. So if I search ocean, it gives me, here's a bunch of set of 5 color palettes that I can work with. They're contrasting but complementary colors that go well together. I can scroll down this list and I can be like, yes, this is the one I love. You can even do more abstract ideas like peace, and it'll give you pictures as well. So I think this is a really cool tool. It's a recent discovery of mine. And then once you've decided of like, oh, I really like this. So if you click on it right here, it gives you the hex code of all of these colors so that you can just copy it and then move it into whatever your graphic design software is. And you can make it that exact color no matter, what's going on with your monitor. So I really like that tool. I think it's really cool and it's totally free for now. But there's also just a lot of really cool color palette resources available online. There are entire Instagram accounts that just put out different groupings of color palettes every day or so. So there's a lot of cool stuff online. Another tool that I use constantly is a web browser extension called What Font. Um, I have it on Google Chrome, and that's pretty much the only thing I use Google Chrome for, because it doesn't really work on it doesn't really work on Firefox very well. But the What Font is a cool browser extension. So if you're on somebody's website and you're like, "Oh, these fonts are so pretty. What are they?" You don't have to ask them. You can use the tool to tell you. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up Chrome so you guys can see. Um, let's go to what's a good one. Let's go to the Goosefoot website. So we've got our lovely website here. We've got some cool fonts going on throughout the site, and different kinds of fonts. So I have it programmed right here onto my bar. It's called What Font. So if I click on that, now if I hover over text, it tells me exactly what kind of font it is. This is Techo. This is Open Sans. So this is a really cool tool that I use a lot, especially when I'm designing for clients, because I want to keep it consistent with their website. And so I'll use it to figure out what they're currently using and keep that going in the piece as well. As for more assets to use, design assets are some of the most fun things. Assets is basically anything you're going to put into your piece. So it's pictures, it's fonts, it's graphic elements, all sorts of fun stuff. So if I'm using Illustrator or Photoshop, I will use tools like elegantflyer.com or FreePick. I'm gonna go ahead and open FreePick. FreePick is probably the one that's my current favorite. They have photos, but they also have vectored images, which means it scales at all sorts of sizes and never gets pixelated or grainy. That's really good when you're making big pieces or pretty much pieces of any size. They have Photoshop files. So pretty much, again, anything, if I search abstract piece, there's drawings, there's photos, and I can download any of these and I'm welcome to use them. If they have a crown, that means you do need to have a paid account. But a lot of these, as you can see, don't have the crown. So I use these for a lot of images, but I will also use them for design assets. I was making a red curtain for a client last night. I'll actually go ahead and pull that up so you guys can see. It's gonna open the file. So I was making this asset for somebody last night. And so I pulled, I got the floor, I got the curtain, I got the confetti. I got all of these assets from that site, and then I could put them all together in one piece. Because there are some people who are skilled enough to draw these things from by hand or with the tools available in the software. I am not. I'm not an artist. So there's a lot of really cool assets you can use. However, they are usually in EPS format, or Photoshop or Illustrator format. And so if you don't have those software, other software might not be able to open those assets, but that's not true for photos. And you can pop those into whatever you're using, including Canva. Canva itself also has a really robust photo library that you are welcome to use. So by all means, use those assets as well. If you just want photos, FreePick is a good option, but Pixabay is another one. Again, don't worry about frantically scribbling these down because I will send you the slides after this class so you can go back to these slides for reference. If you want more creative fonts, again, I love fonts so much. But if you want to use ones that aren't just automatically built into your system, Duffont, Font Space, and Font Squirrel all have free fonts. I think Font Squirrel is the one I use the most. When the site's up, their site goes down a lot. But see, they have a lot of fonts, and some of them, there's so many different fonts for so many different moods. And so you can find one that you like. Here's Open Sans that we use on the Goosefoot site. You can find the ones you like and you can go ahead and download them. You can also search, again, moods. So if you search happy, here's a bunch of results that come up for happy. You know, coffee. Nope, nothing came back. So you can play with it a lot. There's different top fonts, hot fonts. So there's a lot of really cool stuff on here. There's also a font identifier, so you can upload an image and you can ask it, tell me what font is in this image. So a lot of really cool tools there as well. So that is all I've got for the slide part of this. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. But this is now our time. So I didn't pull up examples. In the past I have, but for one, I don't want to shame people. I don't want anybody to think just because you're starting out and you may have made mistakes that I talked about that you shouldn't do in this class before, that doesn't make you a bad designer. That doesn't make you worthy of ridicule. And it's not fair for me to use people's work in that manner. So I didn't want to do that in this class. I didn't want to show you all the things that are bad. You guys have seen bad stuff online. You know what works and what doesn't work. So I wanted to use this time to talk about what works. But again, because there are so many people signed up for this class and so many of you have such fascinating backgrounds, but you're also in such different industries, I didn't have a ton of great examples to pull up either. So I wanted to use this time more kind of hands-on for us. So again, please feel free to ask your questions at any point. But we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to make a pretend graphic if nobody has a big question to pop up. And, you guys in the chat can help me decide how to do that. Or I can also show you guys more of the stuff I've done for various clients as well. So again, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for the YouTube channel now. So thank you guys, everybody online who's watching this. And